Drug shortages are not going away. FDA has a critical role to play, but it cannot do it alone.
Hi, and welcome to GAO's Watchdog Report, your source for fact-based, nonpartisan news and information from the U.S. Government Accountability Office. I'm your host, Holly Hobbs. Drug shortages are a serious public health concern. They can delay or limit a patient's access to effective care with potentially dire consequences for their health. Over the summer, the Food and Drug Administration was tracking a number of drug shortages. We'll learn more about this issue and what's being done about it from GAO's Mary Denigan-Macauley. Thanks for joining us.
Happy to be here.
Mary, maybe we can start with, what are some examples of drugs that have recently had shortages?
Every year, we have over 100 drugs that are in shortage, and these are really very important drugs that are life-saving. For example, oncology drugs that treat cancer, drugs that are necessary for surgeries. And so when they're in shortage, patients can't get surgeries. They're not getting the treatment they need to be able to survive the cancer that they're experiencing. So it's a pretty serious issue.
What causes a drug shortage?
In its simplest form, think of your economics 101, supply and demand, right? When demand outpaces supply, you're going to have a shortage. And think about during the pandemic when we had the toilet paper crisis. Everyone was hoarding toilet paper, and so we had a high demand, and prices just soared. Some people were saying like 700%. And so in that case, someone will step in and they'll produce more of the product to be able to alleviate the shortage so it doesn't go on for years and years. Drugs are a little different. It doesn't play the same way because it's very expensive and time-consuming to produce a drug. And so having that supply on hand is difficult. So economics and supply is one of the reasons. Mother Nature comes into play too. Heparin is a great example. Down in Puerto Rico in 2017, we had Hurricane Irma and Maria hit a plant that caused a shortage of heparin. And then, just as the supply was getting back in action, heparin was in high demand during COVID-19, and that exacerbated the supply once again. Then a tornado hit a plant in 2023 in North Carolina, and that further exacerbated the supply. So Mother Nature plays a hand. When you manufacture the drug, it also has to be of a very good quality. So if the Food and Drug Administration that does inspections that needs to approve that drug to be sold on the market to make sure that it's safe and effective. If they find a problem, for example, manufacturing has to stop. So there are a variety of different things that can cause supply shortages.
So FDA is tracking this. Do they know, or do we know if it's getting better or worse?
It's a tough question because it's been happening for such a long period of time. We've had drug supply problems over the years. The recent data that we analyzed has shown that the number of drugs in shortage is actually going down. However, the shortages are lasting longer. And so this is not something that's going to be solved in the near future.
You said that we're tracking it. How are we or FDA tracking shortages?
So the Food and Drug Administration, or FDA, is required by law to be able to track these. And they do, and they get their information from a variety of different sources. So, for example, manufacturers are required to report if they think there's going to be a potential shortage. They also get information from hospitals and doctors. And so there are dedicated staff at FDA that look at this information, they analyze it, and when something's going to be in shortage, they go ahead and they post it on their website.
So what's being done to solve this problem of shortages?
FDA has an important role here. There are a variety of things that FDA can do. They can extend the shelf life of a drug to be able to keep the supply. They can also look if other countries are manufacturing that drug and see if it's safe and effective that it can be imported into the United States. They also have early efforts at developing what we call a quality maturity program to ensure that the drugs can be manufactured without defects, so that would slow down the production of certain drugs or they need to be taken off the market because of a defect. But FDA is only one of the players. There are other agencies within the Department of Health and Human Services where FDA is. So, for example, another agency is looking at ways of bringing certain key ingredients to manufacture them here in the United States so that we're not reliant on those overseas. You also have other agencies, for example, the Drug Enforcement Agency, control certain drugs so that they're not misused. You have the military, which is a large purchaser of drugs from the federal government to be able to ensure their supply for their military members. And you have programs like Medicare that have insurance to help the public pay for the drugs that they need as they age. So a lot of different players. FDA cannot do this alone.
Mary just told us that the Food and Drug Administration plays a key role in helping to prevent drug shortages, but that FDA is just one agency working on this issue. Mary, what more do we think should be done to address drug shortages?
We really need to have a coordinated effort, not only within HHS, but also across the federal government to shore up these supplies so that we can catch a supply issue before it becomes critical and before we get into a shortage situation. We made a recommendation that Health and Human Services should do this because they had initial efforts to coordinate, and we feel it's important that they continue moving forward.
And last question, what's the bottom line of this report?
The bottom line is that FDA has a critical role to play, but it cannot do it alone. It must coordinate with the other key players. And we need to do this to ensure that we have that supply of drugs that Americans need and rely on every day for important life-saving treatments.
That was Mary Denigan-Macauley talking about our new report on drug shortages. Thanks for your time, Mary.
Thanks for having me, Holly.
And thank you for listening to the Watchdog Report. To hear more podcasts, subscribe to us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you listen. And make sure to leave a rating and review to let others know about the work we're doing. For more from the Congressional Watchdog, the U.S. Government Accountability Office, visit us at gao.gov.